A group of cave researchers explores an unmapped cave system, 305 meters below the surface. After they manage to open a crack to go deeper, they hear screams from some kind of animal, and finally those animals come out in a swarm, which turn out to be dangerous flesh-eating birds. As a result, the cave researchers are eaten by many of those flesh-eating birds, while the others have the chance to escape to the surface, and finally, the researchers die. The scene shifts to a school, where a high school girl named Ally wants to go home. But she does not realize that some bullies mock her, yet she cannot hear them or anything around because she has already lost her hearing, which means she is deaf. But Ally still can speak normally. So when she meets a boy who is her crush, he already understands her condition. Therefore, the boy uses sign language so Ally can understand him. At home, Ally has a family who loves her. There's her father, named Hugh, her mother, named Kelly, her grandmother, who is Kelly's mother, and a younger brother, and all of them can already use sign language to communicate with Ally. Ally also has a big dog, and when Ally is teased by her mother about her crush, Ally sees the dog's fur become tense while it keeps barking outside the house, as a sign that the dog senses something wrong outside. At night, when seeing a helicopter flying, Ally sees her grandmother smoking outside, which makes Ally remember that her grandmother has a lung disease, and Kelly would be mad if she saw her mother smoking again. So the grandmother quickly puts out the cigarette and asks Ally not to tell her mother. Ally then sees her parents talking about her condition. It reminds her of a car accident several years ago, which caused her to lose her hearing since then. While chatting with her crush before sleep, the boy sends her a video of many birds flying, but the way those birds fly looks strange to Ally. In the end, she does not really care, but not for the dog, who senses that those birds are not right. Sometime later, Ally is woken up by her mother in the early morning, who tells her that something bad has already happened in their city. Therefore, Ally goes to the living room, where she sees the news on TV about cities attacked by something, which is also reported on other channels. One of the channels claims that they get a viral video from social media, and after warning about the violent content, they show the video, which shows many corpses with only bones left on their legs. The channel then shows another viral video about a woman and a child trapped inside a car, where the woman shows the chaotic situation and she tells everyone to stay quiet. Not long after that, they hear an explosion in the distance, so they go outside the house, and it turns out to be a jet plane fighting against something dangerous. When they return inside, they finally know from the news that the dangerous thing is those flesh-eating birds. Not long after that, the broadcast immediately switches to an emergency message from the government, instructing everyone to do a self-lockdown at home and stay quiet. So Hugh tells everyone to follow the government's instructions. But Ally thinks that their city is a place that can be noisy anytime. Therefore, she and her family have a bigger chance of being found by the flesh-eating birds. That is why Ally and her family decided to escape far away from the city to minimize the threat from those birds. Hugh's friend, named Glenn, also joins them with several guns he brings for safety. After everything is ready, Ally and her family begin to leave the city, and along the way, they see their city already in chaos. Meanwhile, in a subway, many people are still trapped there, and they try not to make noise as the government instructed. But there is one person who does not understand the situation, which is a baby who keeps crying. So the mother tries to calm the baby. As a result, everyone is terrified, and one of them is forced to take the baby out of the train, makes the mother unwilling. She says that she will accompany her baby, and finally, they are sent out of the train. The mother feels confused, but she keeps walking to find a safe place while calming her baby. But when the baby drops the pacifier, the baby starts crying again, and there are flesh-eating birds in front of them that notice the sound. The mother panics and runs in another direction, but the birds move faster to chase the mother and the baby, and finally, they die. Sometime later, Ally and her family arrive at a gas station to fill up on fuel, so Ally uses this chance to take the dog to pee. But when the dog finishes, it suddenly barks at a man who points a gun at Ally. Then her family comes to ask what the man wants, and he answers that he wants their car. But before Hugh can give the car keys, Glenn shoots the man's leg with a rifle, so Ally is saved, and finally, the man is left behind alone. On the way, Ally starts searching for more information about the flesh-eating birds on the internet, as she learns that they call the birds vesp from the word avispa, meaning wasp in Spanish, because of their habit of swarming. Kelly feels confused about why the vesps are only discovered now, which Ally assumes means they were trapped in a cave, and finally, they mutate, so they should never be outside the cave. Not long after that, Ally and her family are stuck in a long traffic jam when trying to enter the toll road, because many people also want to escape as far as possible from the Vesps. So Ally and her family decide to take a shortcut through a dirt and gravel road in the forest. But after some time, suddenly several deer cross the road, which shocks Glenn, so the car falls into a ravine, and finally, they crash. Glenn's condition is still okay, but his leg is trapped by the front part of the car, so Kelly tries to call for an ambulance, but it never connects. He looks for something to help free Glenn, but he only finds a crowbar, so he struggles to release Glenn. Thinking that Hugh and the family must continue the journey, Glenn asks for his gun. So Hugh gives it, and Glenn threatens to shoot Hugh if he refuses to leave. So Hugh has no choice but to leave him, but Hugh promises to come back to save his friend. After throwing away the crowbar, Hugh and his family go back into the car, where Ally sees the dog's fur become tense again as a sign that it senses something wrong. This makes Ally remember the government's message to stay quiet. Therefore, she tells her father not to start the car, and suddenly, the Vespas come toward their car, trying to break in. More and more Vespas come to the car, so Ally tries to calm the dog, who keeps barking, but it does not want to be quiet. The noise from the Vesps is heard by Glenn, so he fires his gun to lure the Vesps to come, making them move away from the car one by one to chase him. He keeps shooting the Vesps that come, but because there are too many Vesps, Glenn cannot shoot them all, and finally he dies. Because the dog does not want to stay quiet, he was forced to do something to it, which is letting it out of the car, and finally, its sound is no longer heard around Ally and her family. Sometime later, Ally and her family are still trapped inside the car, while inhaling the foul stench of the Vesps. Because the Vesps are still near the car, Hugh goes out to find something to lure the Vesps away. But not long after he gets out of the car, the grandmother starts coughing and having difficulty breathing, making noise, so she is quickly given the breathing aid they already brought. But it turns out one Vesp is already lured by that sound. Therefore, Hugh slowly walks back to get the crowbar he threw before, then he throws it farther to lure the Vesp, and finally it does not know what hard object it tries to eat. After returning inside the car, Hugh tells something important, that the Vesps are blind. They can only hear, but their hearing is very sensitive. Ally thinks this is an advantage for her and her family, because they all can use sign language, so they can minimize sound without needing to speak. Hugh then says they need shelter before dark, but first he goes out bringing a lighter to burn Glenn's car in the ravine, after knowing that his friend is already dead. The fire causes noise, and finally, the car explodes, luring the Vesps to go toward the sound, and Ally and her family can start to escape on foot. When climbing a hill, the grandmother has trouble breathing again, so she must use the breathing aid again, and she feels guilty that she almost caused her family to die in the car. While resting on the hill, the younger brother sees a fairly big house through binoculars. Therefore, Ally and her family decide to go to that house. Night finally comes when Ally and her family arrive at the house they aim for, but the house is surrounded by tall fences, and the gate is locked with metal objects that can make noise. To call the owner of the house out, Hugh has no choice but to hit the metal objects on the gate, but the risk is that a Vesp comes after hearing the noise. This makes the owner of the house come out angrily, so she tells Hugh and his family to leave, but she does not realize that there are more Vesps around. As a result, the owner is targeted by the Vesps, then surrounded, and finally, she dies. Hugh and his family then go to a sewer to get through the fences surrounding the house, but Hugh goes through the sewer alone first to make sure the house is safe. After he feels the house is safe to stay in, Hugh tells his family to come. Therefore, one by one they start crawling, but after some time, there's a rattlesnake in the middle of the sewer making noise, and finally, the family is noticed by the Vesps that come from both sides of the sewer. This makes Kelly's leg bitten by several Vespas, so she cannot bear the pain and screams. So Hugh looks for something to lure the Vesps, and after they hear the sound of a loud engine, they move away from the sewer toward the engine, which turns out to be a wood chipper machine. As a result, the Vesps are tricked into entering the machine, and finally, they die. Hugh and his family then enter the house, where they treat Kelly's injured leg, which is quite serious, so they quickly stop the bleeding with various treatments, guided by the grandmother, who is a former nurse. After the grandmother sees that Kelly's bleeding has already stopped the next day, she tells Hugh that Kelly's leg must get antibiotics so the infection does not spread, and the antibiotics are not in the house. Knowing this, Hugh and Ally decide to go search for the antibiotics, while the younger brother stays with the grandmother in the house. Hugh and Ally begin to go out to search for antibiotics, where they see many Vesps flying in the sky, So Hugh and Ally must open the locked gate slowly before they see many Vesps quietly resting on the power lines. Arriving at a small, very quiet town, they find a fairly big pharmacy, but the front door is locked. Therefore, they go through the back door, which can be opened. Once inside, they see several corpses with only bones left on their legs, until they finally find the needed antibiotics. Ally then feels curious about something moving under a cloth, so she opens it, which turns out to be a person's stomach filled with Vesp eggs, also in other people's stomachs. Suddenly, liquid sprays onto Ally from one of the hatching eggs, making her scream instantly. And finally, several Vesps come into the pharmacy. Therefore, Ally looks for a way to distract the Vesps until she sees a sprinkler that can be used. So she tells Hugh about it, and he tells Ally to take a mop nearby so he can burn it with the lighter. After the mop is burning, Hugh points it at the sprinkler, causing the fire alarm to go off, along with water spraying. While the Vesps are distracted by the alarm, Hugh and Ally quickly move away from them, and finally, they manage to escape the pharmacy. Not long after that, they see someone in black in the distance, who turns out to be a priest. Because he cannot speak, which means he is mute, he uses writing in a book to invite Hugh and Ally to join his group, with rituals full of silence. When they respond that they are not interested, the priest does not give up and invites them again, but they're still not interested, and finally, the priest shows his tongue already cut in half. After Kelly's leg is getting better, Ally tells her father that usually there's an emergency broadcast from a news television network, but sometimes the broadcast goes off like what happens on their TV now because of no signal. Ally adds that the news network transmits from a bunker somewhere, which once explained that the Vesps do not like extreme cold, so people living in snowy areas can survive, with proof of Vesp corpses and snow piles that Ally once saw. Sometime later, many guests come to the house, who turn out to be the priest and his followers. Therefore, Hugh goes out to ask what their purpose is. The priest still wants to invite Hugh and his family to join his group, and he asks them to follow the teachings that the priest and his followers believe. But once again, Hugh refuses their invitation, and he begs them not to disturb him and his family. Feeling there's no chance left, the priest finally reveals his true purpose, which is that he and his followers want Ally, because she is considered a fertile girl. As a result, Hugh can make sure that the priest and his followers are not good people and come from a heretical cult, so he threatens to shoot them if they don't leave. But the cult leader reminds him to stay calm in a world where no noise is allowed anymore. Then he shows his tongue that was already cut off, and finally, he smiles while leaving the house. Sometime later, while sleeping, Ally receives an SMS from her crush, who actually still lives, and he tells her that he has already arrived in the cold northern region, where many survivors succeed in reaching an area called Refuge. Ally feels happy with this news, but when she wants to know more about the refuge, her chat can't be sent because the internet is already dead. That night, while sleeping, Hugh feels like he hears something from outside the house, so he goes to check at the front door, and it turns out there's a girl standing alone outside. Therefore, the girl is led inside, and after Hugh sees a wound on her jaw, he asks her to open her mouth, which shows that her tongue was already cut halfway. Hugh can be sure that the girl comes from that heretical cult that succeeds in escaping, but Hugh's guess is wrong, because the girl is actually still part of the cult with many phones hidden inside her jacket. At that moment, Ally wakes up because of thunder, and she immediately sees something behind her window that makes her curious. So she goes to approach it, and it turns out to be a phone, together with its alarm that is activated loudly, which makes the Vesps start coming to the house. The alarm also activates on the girls' phones, so even more Vesps come to the house. The phones are quickly destroyed by putting them into water. But the threat is not over, because there are still some phones around the house with alarms newly activated, until one phone is even thrown inside the house by the cult members. Therefore, Hugh and his son quickly block the Vesps from coming in, while the others hide underground, and suddenly, some cult members arrive trying to kidnap Ally. After injuring Kelly, the cult members drag Ally out of the house, but the grandmother stops them by pushing the cult members down. Once Ally is freed from the cult members, the grandmother screams as loud as possible to attract the Vesps, and finally, she and the cult members die. But the problem is still not finished, because Ally is kidnapped again by the cult leader and his followers, which of course, is not allowed by Hugh and his family. So they bravely beat the cult leader and his followers, until Hugh gets the chance to beat the cult leader many times, and finally, he dies. But not for the girl and a woman who are allowed to leave, hoping they can learn a lesson and find the right and true teachings. After that incident, Hugh and his family start going north, to find the area called the refuge that Ally knew about before. And after some time, they finally arrive at the refuge area, which turns out to be around the mountain, where Ally can go online again to chat with her crush. Ally wonders whether the Vesps will adapt faster to the cold, or whether humans will adapt faster to a lifestyle without sound. The Silence movie ends with Ally, who can now shoot arrows together with her boyfriend, and finally, they use that skill to kill the Vespers they find. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notification so you don't miss the latest recaps.